Ladies and gentlemen, good news, bad news today. This is our last lecture. So, if you need to pause this and cry a little bit, you go ahead. I'll see you on the next slide. We're talking about third wave feminism this week. It's gonna be cool. All right, next slide. Hi, sorry. I changed some things here, and I was looking at this thinking, this doesn't look familiar, but it's okay. I did this myself only minutes ago, and I've already forgotten. Must be the end of the semester. Anyway, I want you to start by clicking this link below. See, it says click for BK's Rebel Girl. Go ahead and do that and listen to Bikini Kill's Rebel Girl. You did a reading about the Riot Girl movement. Bikini Kill is one of those bands. And this is a super fun punk song that I think will get us in the mood for the rest of the lecture. So you go do that, and then come back and go to the next slide. All right? Okay, see you there. Oh, hi! So did you like the song? I like a little punk when I'm in the right mood. Sometimes it makes my head hurt, but sometimes it makes me want to dance around and yell naughty things out loud. So I hope it did much the same for you. So third wave feminism, there was for a long time an argument amongst feminists and cultural critics about whether or not there was such a thing as a third wave. And I will indeed admit to you that I was once on the side of there's no third wave. This is just the natural and logical outcome of the second wave. But I have come to disagree with myself, as I so often do, to admit that I was wrong, which proves I'm a woman, and to say there is such a thing as the third wave, and it is different kind of feminism from second wave feminism. They're related, they're siblings, they grew up in the same house, but they're not the same thing. The third wave, as it says there on the slide, comes from three places. We'll go through those one at a time. 1, the backlash. 2, the Hill-Thomas hearings. And 3, the pornography wars. Yeah? Okay, next slide. So, well, let's start with the backlash, which is perhaps, it's probably something you've never heard of, except you may have kind of in a tangential sort of way. What we know is that for every time women make strides forward in equality, liberty, wages, rights, etc., there's always a period of backsliding or conservative backlash. For example, you had during World War II a time of relative female power, relative, let's not get overexcited, followed by the 50s, not so much. The same thing happens here. The first wave feminist movement is really the late 60s and the 70s. In 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected president in November of 1980, thus ushering in 12 years of cultural conservatism, 8 years under Reagan, 4 years under Bush the Senior. None of those men of which are, people I'm fond of. The backlash is indeed part of the so-called Reagan Revolution, much beloved by conservatives everywhere. But one of the things that happened under the Reagan's presidency, which feels to me significantly less than admirable, is the closing of rape crisis centers, the defunding of women's health clinics, huge cuts in social welfare programs that served women and children, both white and non-white. Indeed, I was working on a rape crisis center in the 80s at Montana State University, and we lost our funding, and we closed for a while until we hustled around and got private funding, and then reopened. And that really is what happened to rape shelters, rape crisis centers, all those kinds of places all over the country. Those places that exist today, still, if they exist because they are privately funded. They don't get any money from the government. That ended. The government is happy to spend money on rich people. It is not happy to spend money on women in need or women who've been victimized by crimes. Anyway, The 80s, the Reagan years are years in which feminists are demonized as unpatriotic, anti-family, communists. Remember our very first lecture when we talked? There was a slide about feminists are, and it was this: we were lesbians and we hated God and we hated America, and I pointed out that was nonsense. But anyway, that's where a lot of that stuff comes from, is from the 80s. And indeed, the very stigma that we have against the word feminist, in great part, comes from this backlash Reagan 80s nasty time for women. A time we are, it feels to me very much, under the current presidential administration, revisiting. Anyway, better move along, huh? Yeah, next slide. The Susan Faludi's book, 80s book, really brought. Susan Faludi's book isn't start the backlash. It doesn't. It's nothing like this. But what it does is it's a book comes out in the late 80s which describes the backlash. Which for the first time, all this stuff was happening in the culture, and a bunch of women were like, "What the heck's going on? How did things go from getting better to getting worse so quick?" Not unlike, what happened there in the 2016 election with the current guy. And so Susan Faludi's book is like, in one place, the place where America found the explanation and argument for what happened and why it happened. Let's go see the next slide. Faludi, essentially, in each chapter, she said the backlash has several arguments, all of them nonsense. I'm going to go through these here. And then later on we'll go back and go through why these are stupid. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. If not, I'll come back and redo this, I guess. So here's the arguments. One, the goals of the feminist movement have been reached. So, feminists, shut up and go home. Problem solved. Two, feminism makes women unhappy. That women were perfectly happy being housewives and mothers until feminism came along and ruined it by making women, bitches. Women are tired from having to work at wage work and go home and do the housekeeping and cook dinners and stuff. It's too exhausting. It's too hard to be a feminist. You should just quit and go home and be submissive to your husband. Career women, you go to college, get a career, you're never going to get married and be happy. Because you're feminists, and feminists don't get married and be happy. Women with any sort of cultural power don't get married and be happy, etc., etc. Oh, by the way, if you do manage to get married, you won't be able to have any babies because there's infertility epidemic. What happens is you go to college, you get a career, now you're a little older, now you can't have babies. Oh no, suddenly your baby making ability disappeared. Daycare, if you do have a baby and you want to go to work, daycare is toxic for children. Your children will be abused in daycare. They will be poisoned in daycare. Terrible things will happen to your child. It will probably end up on a school shooting spree not because the kid has guns given to it by conservative America, but because the kid had a working mother. And women, all women, should evaluate their goals and the ways in which feminism has lied to them. You should go home and there find your true happiness. Oh, for God's sakes, it's true womanhood all over again, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, if you want to stop and get a puke bucket, you go ahead. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Backlash messages flooded popular culture and media in a ton of ways. There in the middle, I remember this Newsweek article. Essentially, the argument here in this article was that if you were a single, and I think they had an age for it, like 30, I mean, not particularly old, and you were working, your chances of getting married were the equivalent of being hit by a meteor. Hit by a meteor. I'm not making that up. See the little meteor there in that Newsweek thing? Yeah, nice. And then you had all these like backlash movies over here. Baby Boom was a movie. Diane Keaton was a high-powered lawyer. A sister or a cousin died, left her this baby. Diane Keaton tried, the lawyer that she was playing, tried in the movie to be a lawyer and raise this baby. Couldn't do it. It was just too hard. And so in the end, Diane Keaton finds her happiness by quitting her high-powered lawyer's job, buying a farm in the country, and dating the local cute veterinarian, and devoting herself full-time to raising her child. Well, that's nice if you can afford a farm in the country, I guess. And over here, probably one of the most famous Backlash movies, Fatal Attraction. The notion was here that Glenn Close's character was a single, again, powerful woman, had an affair with Michael Douglas, a married, powerful man. Michael Douglas made a number of promises to her. When he wouldn't go through on them, in the movie, Glenn Close, the woman he was cheating on with his wife, she goes crazy. She breaks into their house. She kills and boils the rabbit. She attacks the wife. That is a notion that sort of single, powerful women are unhinged and likely to be violent, that they are so desperate to get married that they'll engage in acts of violence to do so. Indeed, when this film was screened, the way the filmmakers had made it, in the end, he kind of pushed her down in a bathtub, and then the cops broke in and they pulled her out and hauled her off, arrested her and hauled her off. Audiences found that immensely and deeply unsatisfying and demanded that a different ending, and so they refilmed it so that Michael Douglas drowned her in the bathtub at the end. So the cheating, and then everybody cheered. So the cheating husband got cheered. He got to live happily ever after with his wife that he'd been cheating on, and the mistress was dead. Nice. Again, if you want to go get a puke bag, I'll see you at the next slide. So here, I told you there was a slide about the things. Of course, the goals of the movement have not been met. They still haven't been met. I've got some stuff about this later, but we got a president who's a sexual predator, and that's bad. But I think what's worse than that is the fact that some significant part of America doesn't care. He came right out and said he grabbed women by the pussies, and they said, "I don't care," and they voted for him. We have a lot of work to be done. One, there's no man shortage, and there's no infertility crisis. And indeed, if you think about this, this makes no sense. If women are putting off marriage for college and careers, who else is putting off marriage? Now, admittedly, 1 out of 10 women are lesbians, so they might be putting off marriage to other women. But if the 9 out of 10 heterosexual women are putting off marriage, aren't they putting off marriage to men who are also not getting married? That is, if women aren't getting married, aren't the men not getting married too? Also, it turns out that if you have good nutrition, you are fertile, very fertile, well into your 40s, and certainly your 30s are perfectly good for having babies. You don't have to have them when you're 16. The statistics don't bear out that nonsense that you have to have your babies young. Now, if you did, good for you. I don't care. Well, of course women are tired from working both shifts. Jesus, who wouldn't be? I'd like to be someone who went to work and came home and sat down and waited for somebody to feed me dinner and put my clean laundry on my dresser. So the answer isn't women should go home. The answer is everybody who lives in a household should contribute to the running of that household, including all of the domestic tasks, right? So everybody should take more responsibility, the men, the children, everybody. Cleaning and cooking shouldn't be the jobs of the people with the uteruses. Unless you like it, but then that means somebody should do some other job. You like to cook? Maybe he can do the laundry. Yeah, and when the kids are big enough, maybe they can do their own damn laundry. They're not crippled. The vast majority of daycares are clean, safe, and they educate children. Indeed, all the statistics and studies say that children who are in daycare before school do better in school when they get there. So some daycare is actually good for kids. Gets them out of the house, away from mom, gets them socialized, etc., etc. And they really do learn significant amounts of things in daycare. I remember one day I picked up my kid, I don't know, she was 3 maybe, and she's like, "Look what I can do, Mommy." And she knelt down and she tied her shoe, and I was like, What? I was going to teach you. And then I thought, settle down, Peg. She learned to tie her shoes. Who cares who taught it to her? I was busy working, making money, and the kid was happy learning to tie her shoes with Miss Sodic. Hey, win-win. Okay, there's the last one. Feminism doesn't make women unhappy. You know what makes women unhappy? Sexism, the opposite of feminism. Inequality makes women unhappy. Sexual predators make women unhappy. Being unsafe in our own country makes women unhappy. Being paid less makes women unhappy. Being tired and overworked makes women unhappy. Really, all of those things would make anyone unhappy. Right, dudes? Right. Okay, next slide. 1991 brought us the now infamous Hill-Thomas hearings. You may not have ever heard of these, but they are, if sort of the Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby thing was what broke the Me Too movement in the last few years here, it is the Hill-Thomas hearings there at the end of the Reagan years, in the midst of Daddy Bush's presidency, the Hill-Thomas hearings, which really crystallized for Americans that, one, a bunch of Americans didn't understand what sexual harassment was. Two, way too many Americans didn't seem to care about sexual harassment or acknowledge that it was a problem. And that three, holy shit, we need to do something about this. Yeah? Next slide. 1992, President Bush, the senior, wanted very much to get Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. A really, really famous and really liberal U.S. Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall, announced his retirement. Thurgood Marshall was black, but really liberal, and by all accounts, a great, great Supreme Court Justice. Bush thought, well, I'm an arch conservative being supported by these backlash Reagan conservatives. I want a conservative, but I should probably put a black guy on the Supreme Court. So they picked Clarence Thomas, a guy who is, just so conservative. This guy doesn't believe in evolution. And I'm sorry. That's stupid. This guy doesn't believe in the most basic rights. He certainly doesn't believe in women's rights to reproductive freedom, which is one of the reasons Bush wanted him on the court. Anyway, so they're having these hearings. The Senate was having hearings. The hearings were chaired by Senator Joe Biden, who's an awfully nice man, but sometimes a bit of a pushover. Still, you should vote for him. Better than not being a pushover. Also, he doesn't grab people by the pussy. Anyway, and so the hearings are going along pretty well, it seems, until a number of women come forward to the committee and say, this Clarence Thomas guy, he's not that cool. He sexual harassed me. Indeed, eventually 4 women came forward. The only person the Senate allowed to testify about it was Anita Hill. She was a lawyer and a professor, and she went to Washington and she testified that she had been sexually harassed in a variety of ways. That he had talked about his penis, he had talked about her breasts, that he had tried to get her to go on a date with him, even though he was married. That there was the famous sort of, who put this pubic hair in my Coke can, which is just so bizarre that I can't even comprehend it, etc., etc. She testified to this. If you're at all interested, there's a bunch of stuff on YouTube. You could go look at it. She's an astoundingly dignified and really credible witness. Senate Republicans, conservatives, attacked her, said she was lying, said she was delusional, said she was making this stuff up. She volunteered to take a polygraph with the FBI's foremost polygraph or lie detector expert. She passed the polygraph, and nonetheless, conservative senators said she was lying. Clarence Thomas, said she was a race traitor. This is one of the problems women of color have, is that they get stuck between, am I loyal to my race or am I loyal to my gender? Thomas said because Hill was black and he was black and she was accusing him that she was a race traitor. And he also said that he was a victim of a high-tech lynching. This is nonsense. He was a sexual predator and a sexual harasser. 4 women came forward. They didn't call them all. But God knows how many others there were that wouldn't come forward. Anyway, the hearings went on for only 3 days. Hill was treated sort of famously or infamously badly by Senate Republicans. Senator Biden kind of let them. Uncle Joe likes things to be nice and he doesn't like confrontation. Anyway, what America did is they watched these hearings and then we decided whose side we were on. And then we argued about it for the next few months. It seems now, if you do the research, and indeed I just wrote a chapter for a book about the Hill-Thomas hearings, it seems now that the general consensus is that she was telling the truth and he was lying. Not just because she passed the polygraph test, because there were a bunch of other witnesses, because she's stuck to her story her whole life. He has turned out to not be a terribly competent Supreme Court justice. He doesn't say much. More women have come forward, etc., etc. So, it's a kind of an early, indeed when I was watching the Kavanaugh hearings, when Christine Blasey Ford was testifying about the way that Brett Kavanaugh raped her, and the way conservative Republicans didn't believe her, I and other women old enough to remember the Hill-Thomas hearings were struck by the similarities in the thing. The difference is that now we at least believe in America that sexual harassment is a thing, and that it is a bad thing. And what we were deciding in 1992 is that a thing? Can't men just talk that way at work? They always have. What's the problem? So the upside of the Hill-Thomas hearings is, as a culture, we got better. Not great, but better about sexual harassment. Okay? Next slide. Let's talk about porn. The third wave feminist comes from three places. There's the backlash against women, which kind of crashes the second wave feminist movement and creates space for a new kind of movement to be born. The Hill-Thomas hearings, which make us clear that you can pass all the laws you want, but until you educate people about issues like sexual harassment, it doesn't matter if it's illegal. People are still going to do it and get elected to high positions in the country. And then the pornography wars is a thing that the feminist movement essentially did to itself. That is, there was and there is an ongoing argument in the feminist movement, both amongst old second wave feminists and third wave feminists, about porn. And it essentially goes this: either porn is bad because it objectifies women and is fundamentally about violence, or two, pornography can be sex positive, and we should just be less hung up about sex and thinking it's shameful and naughty. I got to tell you, the sex positive thing sounds good, and I'm all for sex positivity, but I'm going to be super honest with you. I don't think that has anything to do with porn. Porn isn't about sex positivity. Porn is porn. I think, and you can think whatever you want, I think porn is about the objectification of women and sometimes men. I think fundamentally porn is coercive and thus intrinsically violent. And I think it's just, I'm sorry, it's a symptom of a society that's sick over sexuality. It's bad. It's a bad way to think about sexuality, if you ask me. So anyway, you see the argument. One side argues that sex is healthy, and until women accept their sexuality, they will be oppressed by fear of their own bodies. Oh my God, I totally agree with that. That's one of the reasons I do the vagina monologues, and you're going to see a video in the video assignment, and you're going to see I'm pretty on the side of let's be clear about healthy sexuality in our bodies. But the pro-sex side also argues that sex workers, prostitutes, that's okay, that you should be able to be a prostitute if you want, that you should be able to choose that, to be free, to be a feminist. If being a feminist is arguing for freedom and liberty, women should have the freedom to be porn stars or prostitutes. Here's the problem with that argument, people. Nobody grows up saying I want to be a prostitute. It's like nobody grows up saying I want to be a crack addict and a burglar. That is, these are things that happen to people in unequal societies who have no other choices. So, no, yeah. Being a sex worker isn't like being a doctor or a professor. Or even something less professional than that, but still perfectly virtuous. Nobody grows up and wants to, nobody says, they say, you want to be a ballerina, not a prostitute. Right? Anyway, I have a clear position on this and I can't hide it. Other feminists argue, including myself, I just did argue that porn is violence. Others argue that porn is erotica. Some people argue that there's a lot of violent porn out there, or anti-woman porn, but that there is such a thing as feminist porn. Okay. And then the argument that all porn is patriarchal. I like this quote by Andrea Dworkin, who wrote, "Erotica is simply high-class pornography. It's better produced, better conceived, better executed, better packaged, and designed for a better class of consumer. It's still porn." And oh yeah, there's no pictures for this section. I'm anti-porn. And again, if you're not, that's okay. I get to have a position. You get to have a position. I'm a feminist. I'm a liberal. I don't need you to agree with me. I'm telling you because if I pretend to not care, then I can give a professorial lecture where I tell you how to think about porn and pretend like I don't have a stake in it. And I do. I have a position. So now you know, and you decide what to do with that stuff. Yeah? Okay. Cool. Next slide. End of part 1 of your last lecture. That means you only have half a lecture to go. Wow. See you there. Okay. Bye.